as you did last week and throughout the course. I think that's the foundation piece for all of us to get a system in place for all of the aspects of our business. So we have about 30 odd slides today. I'm going to do my very best to get you done here today in 2 hours. We don't have anybody in the room today. A lot of you that are in the room are actually at home right now and or out working on transactions, which is fantastic. I did get lots of messages from this cohort, and it seems like you guys are already off to the races using some of the systems that I taught you last week into your business this week. So it's fantastic. I wrote a couple of things up on the screen here, and they're kind of, well, numbers, of course, as you see, but I'm going to throw a question out there to say, what do you think the numbers represent in column 1? Oh, what are we doing here?
Go ahead.
Got it. For column 1 and column 2, they represent the same titles, but they represent different, I'll say, time frames. Does anybody know what 149,518 represents? And I'll say that was 20 years ago. No guesses?
No guesses.
No guesses. Okay, so in 2002, so 20 years ago, there was that many N's done on the Toronto Real Estate Board. In 2022, this was the amount of N's done on the Toronto Real Estate Board. So, you know, within a spectrum of like 600 or 700 transactions. So what that number is, just for everybody's clarification, if you're checking or fact checking me right now, N's represents the buying and selling side. So what you'll see on Trev is just the sell side. So for instance, this will say 75,000 and change or whatnot, right? It won't give you that number. What you do with the number you see in Trev is multiply it by 2, because there is the buying side transaction and fee as well. What do you think this number represents and that number represents? Any guesses?
Number of realtors?
Yes. Who said that?
That was Anne Maria.
All right. She's right. That's the number of realtors that were in the Toronto Real Estate Board. So 20 years ago, we had 17,500 realtors on the Toronto Real Estate Board, and now we have 70,000 realtors on the Toronto Real Estate Board. What does this number represent? We're doing quick math now. They're trying to figure it out. They're going to get it. It's Jeopardy. Dun, dun, dun.
Average deal per agent.
The average deal per agent. Deal realtor. Same thing down here. Awesome. So, you know, it's good to do these types of exercises to reflect upon how the market has shifted and changed in just 20 years, essentially. And that's quite a dramatic shift, right? We're talking about 20 years ago, I was still selling in these markets. The average realtor, and of course, I hate to say the word average all the time. One of my mentors in real estate always said, you know what averages are like, Mike? It's be like you shoved your head in the oven and put your feet in the fridge or freezer. On average, you'd be okay, temperature-wise, but you're not, of course, right? So we got to take it with a grain of salt. But I will say that the actual transactions and the history of what's evolving in our business is going down per agent. So it's getting more difficult to source business because, as you see here, I mean, that's a dramatic drop in per agent productivity. Now, I will say a couple of caveats in that number. In that number, there's a lot of lenders now that are in there, like mortgage brokers, appraisers. There's people now that are forming teams. So teams were not a big thing 20 years ago. And so what happens is you get all kinds of team people feeding a system. But notwithstanding that, you still have 70,000 plus people last year that paid their membership dues for the Toronto Real Estate Board. Now, there's charts that are floating around the internet right now in some of the Facebook groups that talk about how many realtors actually didn't do a transaction last year, and it's significant. I'll share that with you next week. I didn't have a chance to pull the charts down, and I'll show you exactly what's happening in the marketplace. Now, this number here is a shocking number. Who can live off of 2 transactions a year if this was their full-time career? Probably not many. Thankfully, you've aligned yourself with Royal LePage Signature. We're significantly more. We're more along the lines of this old number. And the reason being is we have a lot of support systems here. We have a lot of opportunities for you to learn, to develop. This is one of those aspects to do that. But I want you to be just mindful of the fact that you're really not competing with a lot of full-time realtors when you really distill it down to the numbers. You're competing, though, with very high-end realtors that are in the marketplace. You had a question?
Yeah. And a question from Steve is how many how many agents are genuinely active?
I'll get that numbers for you next week, Steve. Like I said, there is a chart floating around. I just didn't have a chance to grab it for the class today that breaks down the actual transactions per agent, basically, right? And there's I think there's close to 15 to 20,000 realtors that did 0 deals. Now, embedded in that are appraisers, mortgage brokers, probably assistants, brand new to the business, learning it. But if you think about it, 20,000, 15,000 of that 70, that's a huge number. And then there's another big number that only did 1 to 3 deals. And so, you know, in this kind of average, what you're seeing, I think, right now is evolution into a lot of team-based models that you're seeing right now. But be mindful, you know, this is what you're really competing with on a typical basis. Realtors that are only doing 2 transactions. You may be having to teach them, you know, how to do the transaction, the paperwork, because if you're only doing 2 deals a year, that's like going to your surgeon and saying, well, how many surgeries did you do, sir, this year? Oh, I did 2 open heart surgeries. You probably don't want to work with that surgeon. And it's the same thing for us as realtors. So the surgeon that only does 2 heart surgeries a year is not as good as the guy that's doing 20, 30, 50 a year kind of thing. So I just wanted to share that with you and kind of burn it into your brain what's really truly happening. And if you want, I could actually, I got a list going back every year. I think I've got it here in my workbook, actually. I do. Is there a camera I can put it up to really close? Yeah. So I'll have this printed out next week for you guys too. And what this is the breakdown per year for the last 20 years on transactions, agent ratio. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, it's a little difficult to make out.
Okay. All right. We'll get that to you next week. It's good to add that to your listing presentations, quite frankly. Next week is listing presentations, so we'll give it to you then. That way, when you are at the kitchen table kind of thing, doing a listing presentation, you'll have some real data behind it. All right, so we're working with buyers today, a system. This was my system, as I shared with you last week. Everything you're getting here is how I ran my business. I stopped selling in my business late 2006 and came into brokeraging and managing and leadership in the industry. So I ran from 1992 to 2006, sold tons of real estate. My diversity in sales and buying sides was obviously your bricks and mortar kind of stuff, your semi-detached towns, detached. But I also ventured into selling farms, real properties, and I did a few cottages up in cottage country. So I have a pretty vast knowledge base there. I did not touch the commercial industrial real estate. It was something I always referred out to as a practitioner. But I do have a fairly broad experience level. In fact, I field a lot of questions for people that are doing properties in the country, you know, up in Caledon or Halton, the Guelph area, and work with you guys as far as figuring out how you structure wells, well inspections, septic inspections. If you're getting into a hobby farm, what's the soil like, loam soil type of thing. What are you dealing with in conservation things, Niagara Escarpment Committee, Grand River Conservation? There's all kinds of things that go into buying a property out in the country where you're buying 5, 10, 15, 20 acres. A lot of people living in the city, it's a dream to do that, but it can be a nightmare if you don't structure the deals properly. So you can always reach out to me if you're ever dealing with some of that. I have a fairly good, healthy knowledge base in that. So the first slide, if it will go forward here, for me. Why will not? I think I lost my ability to click.
Try that mic.
There we go. All right. So for buyers, I always looked at back in the day, and I think today is as relevant. Who are we looking at as buyer populations that we can work with. And so these are the three big ones in Canada. So the first one, of course, is immigration. Here's a statistic from StatsCan. By 2030, 54% of the Canadian population will have been foreign born. Now, you've probably heard for the next 3 years, we're going to be introducing probably about 500,000 new immigrants to Canada. Everybody's aware of that, I hope. Out of that 500,000, you're probably looking at about 200+ thousand that are GTA based. So for you guys planning, if you're newer into business a couple of years, whatnot, if you are planning a segment you want to target and get really good at, you're probably going to want to focus in on this sector because there is going to be no shortage of potential buyers in the next 3 years. I mean, if you look at it, we're probably going to have, based on that math, 600+ thousand new buyers or potential tenants. So for those of you sitting back there saying, oh, I don't touch tenants, I don't do leases, you're missing a golden opportunity. Tenants and renters, particularly in this segment of the buyer population, they turn into buyers more quickly than domestic Canadians that are renters. They seem to, stay in the rental situation a lot longer. However, the immigrant that comes to our country, they really want to plant their flag and buy real estate. So really focus in on that. If you have contacts, networks that you can use right now, to me, this would be an amazing opportunity for you to focus in on. The next one, this is call it the baby, well, I call one baby echo boom. This is really the baby boom generation. So for those of you that are not familiar with baby boomers, they were born post Second World War. So those are from 1946 to they call it the mid-60s. That population is currently the most wealthy population in Canada. They have lots of investments. They have little to no debt. They will be a force to be reckoned with because right now they're living in your, call it 2-story, 2,500+ square foot home. And bigger, like, you're going 3, 4, 5,000. And a lot of them have become empty nesters. And so their children have moved on. They've created their own lives. And so they've got too much house that they're living in right now. What you may want to focus in on this segment is not only helping them possibly downsize or call it right size into a property where they're going from 3,000 to 1,000, but you may also want to look at, with the new regulations we're seeing coming out of the government, the provincial government, federal, is that they're going to be adjusting or allowing to be adjusted the municipal level zoning situation. So we're talking single family residential here. If you took a 3,000 square foot home where only the husband and wife were living there, again, too much home for them. But now they're looking at amending and adjusting the zoning. So you'd be able to go and do a duplex or a triplex or a quad. And they're going to eliminate all the red tape behind that. So instead of waiting for a year, 2, 3, 4 years, they're going to expedite that so that you could do some renovations. So you want to, if you're going to focus on this market, you're going to want to learn all that's going to be needed for them to know zoning requirements, building permits, get really good with relationships with contractors and whatnot. There's lots of great new technology that are coming into this space as well. So there's new floors that have been invented. They're fall-proof floors for seniors. They minimize the injury rate by something like 43 to 46% if somebody was to fall. And so people that are over 81, for those of you that have family or friends that are in that age bracket, a fall could be devastating to them. Quite frankly, a fall breaking their hip, there's tragic consequences to that. So there's so much you can be doing now in this segment. In fact, there's also a designation called the SRES designation, Senior Residential Specialist designation, that's offered by third parties. I think once in a while, Royal LePage Canada brings in this course as part of the syllabus for Royal LePage Canada. But if you want to work this segment, you may want to focus in on doing something like that. This group here also is heavily connected to this group here. These are the grandparents and parents of the Echo Boom generation. They are also becoming, I will say, for these folks here, they are becoming banks and lenders. You may have heard the street term bank, oh, mom and dad. So what's happening here, because they have so much equity, they have little to no debt. They're now actually providing some of the sources of down payments and equity and money capital for this generation to purchase their real estate. So, you for this generation, you not only have the end user decision they're making, but you also have so many other spin-offs that you can be looking at. Imagine aligning yourself with a great contractor that you can use and refer out to people that can help modify a house, or imagine connecting them with a great lender, mortgage broker, where they can help their kids or their grandkids. It's just a win-win for everybody. Again, focus in on where the actual transactions are going to come from. And the last one is the echo boom generation. This is the, called the millennials and Gen Z and all that kind of stuff. This is a big cohort. This is getting to be as big as the echo boom, the baby boom generation. They are really, really committed to this concept. Does anybody know what DEI is? Everybody ever heard of this term? No?
I guess it's just good.
Okay. D stands for diversity, E stands for equity, and I stands for inclusion. This generation is very socially minded. And so when you're dealing with this generation, you're going to really want to respect those boundaries that they have and those interests and philosophies that they have. So right now in our space, this is a very high level conversation. It's occurring at board levels, at the national level, Canada Real Estate Association and AREA. The board that I'm the president of right now, Mississauga Real Estate Board, we literally just struck a brand new task force and committee on this. And it's amazing the aspects that DEI touch upon in our society. And it's very relevant to us. I mean, we're building communities, we're putting people in their dreams. This is something very important. So, when you're renting, representing a seller that doesn't want to rent to a certain demographic, age, culture, religion, whatnot, this is stuff that you need to have in the forefront. You'll have to make a moral choice. Do you want to work with somebody that has those types of attitudes? Personally, I would say no, but that's your decision. The other aspect of this too, and we're kind of connected to it there as well in this age bracket, is accessible housing. You're going to hear this word a lot. Accessible housing. You may have seen some articles already about that. And that's for people that have disabilities that are not able to access a property. So if you look at all the properties you may have encountered over your career, how many of those are easily accessible by a person in a wheelchair? Probably not a lot. But this is going to be a big deal in the next 5 to 10 years, where I think there's going to be a lot of retrofitting of homes, and the government's going to get behind that with programs, with grants, with things that you can file in your taxes where you can get a tax rebate on introducing that. I did a seminar when I was in Banff at the conference last month, and the lady was in her 30s. She had been in a catastrophic car accident, became a paraplegic. So she had use of all of her limbs and whatnot, but then became a paraplegic. And her life changed overnight. Like, things we take for granted that she now had to overcome. Just jumping over a curb, like with your feet, no problem. Try and move over a curb when you're a paraplegic. It's impossible, right? So this is a snapshot of where the business is and 100% where it's headed for buyers. So if you've already tapped into one of those 3 sources of buyers, developing, as I said before, the relationships last week, we're going to talk about relationships, not databases, relationships. If you can tap into one of those 3 segments, you will have a healthy supply and pipeline of buyer leads going forward. And of course, it's a compounding effect. If you become very specialized and the go-to person in any one of those, or a combination multiples, people are going to reach out to you. Because if you deliver something that the marketplace is not, you become the go-to person. So my advice to you, if you're sitting there at home, you're wondering, hey, I want to do one of these, pick one and do whatever you need to do and research. Google's your friend. Go to YouTube. Look at the organized real estate, what we're talking about in these types of segments, and every one of them are very much talked about in our sector and our industry. Is there any questions on that from anybody before we move on? What you're going to do with this, just for clarity purposes, you're going to bolt on one of these extras into what you're currently doing. If you're not doing one of these now, become an expert at this, because believe me, it'll pay dividends, and you'll feel good about yourself by delivering your professional knowledge to these people. Okay, next slide we got. So this is my little survey part where I've done some surveys myself, and I've also grabbed some surveys from the National Association of Realtors, which is the American version of the Canadian Real Estate Association. And there's about 1,600,000 American realtors. There's a lot. There's 10 times more, a little bit more than 10 times more than us. So out of this is they did a survey on how often do salespeople follow up. And again, this is important for buyers because we get a lot of buyer leads. You may be invested in some of the buyer lead generation tools online. And so here's the reality. In all the surveys, 48%, so almost half, do not even respond to the lead. So for whatever method they use to solicit a lead, half of the people you're competing with didn't even have the courtesy to call somebody back or respond. 25% of the people make 2 contacts and stop. So they respond to the first lead and they make one more call. So you're almost up to, well, you're up to 73%. 12% make 3 contacts and stop. So they've taken the initial lead, make a couple more calls, and then they're out of the game because the guy maybe, or the contact prospect said, no, not interested, blah, blah, blah. 85%, if you add this number up, 85% of all your competitors stop after 3 contacts. Now, there may be people in here that tell you, do not call, right? We have the do not call registry. If they tell you, do not call me, make sure you put them on that registry. And you actually have to update our office for that as well. I think Matt or you, Najee, take care of that. So if somebody actually does say that to you, look at, yes, I responded to your inquiry on the internet, blah, 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 I filled out your form, but I don't want you calling me anymore. You got to strike them off your list, and you got to notify our brokerage, because our brokerage actually has to update that list. These fines are severe and nasty when the DNC, CRTC gets involved in things. I'm talking like 6-figure fines I've seen for realtors in the country. It's nasty. So here you go. 85% of your competitors are stopping after 3 contacts or less. So it's something just to be aware of, okay? Again, we're just going through the surveys just so you're aware of what's happening, what your competitors are doing. Next slide. Well, when do people buy or sell? This is all part of the same survey that was done by NAR. So people buy, sell, or refer. Only 2% on the very first time you're going to meet them. Only 2%. And put yourself in the same shoes where you see what's happening for yourself. If you're going to go buy a car, how often do you go buy the car the very first time? You walk into the showroom, you've done no prior research, and you're going to buy. Probably not likely. Well, it falls in line with us. 3% buy on the second contact, 5% on the third, 10% on the fourth. So that means 80% of all purchases, referrals, and sales happen between contact number 5 and 12. Now you go back to the previous question that they asked. Most people were out of the follow-up process by 3, 85% of them. So as you start to go down that continuum, you're competing with less and less realtors. What's the motive? What's the moral of the story? You got to stay in the game. Here's part of the survey as well. What stopped people from making decisions to buy, refer, or sell real estate? 1% was a cause of death. 3% just moved away, sold it on their own. Some bought from a friend, amazingly enough. That does happen. People, at work, hey, I like your area, I like your home. Can we make a deal happen? That does happen. 9% buy from a competitor. Now, if they were a prior client of yours and they've gone and bought from a competitor, you haven't stayed in contact and touch with them, which you see in the bottom part here. 14% buy from a discounter or a fee-based, low fee-based model. Now, you probably are saying to yourself, that's way too low, because we have this built-in conditioning we've given ourselves that everybody's a price discounter and everybody's making choices based upon price. But I'm here to stand before you, knowing all of our top producers in this office and in Don Mills, that people choose value over price 100% of the time. We have people that still generate 6%, 7% listings in this brokerage. Typically, we're talking 5% listings, right? That's the called the new norm in our industry. But I will tell you, standing here, that most of our realtors that are top producers are not in the price discounting game. They have established and determined their own value. In our listing course, I'm actually going to share with you part of how I negotiated my fees with sellers, so that you have a roadmap on how I used to operate my business. For that, you can choose to use it, choose not to use it. Again, it's all your choice, it's your business. But this is an amazing thing. Most people are not choosing based upon price, they're choosing on value. So what does this all mean? 68% of all consumers have this thing called a perceived indifference about you. And what does that mean? In brackets, it says you do not, they believe you do not care about them because you're not in touch with them. So if they're a past seller, you sold their property, past buyer, they've moved into the property, if you haven't talked to them in 6 months, a year, 2 years, however long that is, they have this perceived indifference built in that you are only interested in the fee, not in them. So again, all about staying in touch with them, staying in contact. Last week, we talked about me sharing with you, I worked 18 of 24 contact points every year. Now people are talking 30 or 36 times you should be reaching out to your list of relationships, not your database, your list of relationships. Make sense, everybody? I think that's the last one for this slide. Yeah. Here's another survey. This was done by NAR as well. What they did in this survey, they took 15,000 home buyers that had purchased a property 2 years previously. 94% were very satisfied with the realtor service. If you recall back to last week, I talked to you about your assessment. Number 9, we assessed your short-term relationship with the client. And remember, I said that I was very convinced that every one of you would be very satisfied and very high performing in the short term, but you dropped the ball in the midterm and the long term. Well, this survey here confirms that. They were very satisfied, the consumer, with how you operated. Believe it or not, simply 2 years later, 36% of the people couldn't remember the realtor's name. This is the realtor that put them into the single largest investment that most of us make in our lives, and they couldn't remember their name. Well, I'm going to say here we've got, where is it? Stay in touch. We didn't have a stay in touch and follow-up system. But when they were asked, even these people that didn't know their realtor's name, would they refer their realtor? 88% of 15,000 people said absolutely. So again, let's go back to what I think is missing in our business. Follow up, follow up, follow up, stay in touch, stay in touch, stay in touch. If you do not have a current system for that, folks, please, 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 as I stand here today, invest in one. There's all kinds of them that are out there. There's CRM platforms that operate as not only customer relationship management systems, but also lead generation sources. And I'm going to share with you 2 that I hear amazing feedback from top agents in our brokerage. So the first one, I believe, is mostly free, and Najee can confirm this, but it's the RLP Sphere. I think that's, I don't know, something like that. You wouldn't know I have a master's degree. The RLP Sphere, I think it's SP, like this, like that. The RLP Sphere is a primarily free service, but there are some cost ones. Is that not correct? Yeah. So there's, but I hear from our realtors, top realtors that are, you know, diamond level, red diamond level, even Chairman's Club level, that are using this product. It's got some built-in AI technology with it that are loving it. And the other one I've heard from a lot of our realtors is this one called Agent Locator. I've heard good things about Agent Locator as a CRM, but also as a lead generation source. So if you're looking for something to invest in to create that gap that you have, those are two that you can start with. If you want to not invest the money in capital right away, start with what we have internally. And Najee, where would they go to get instructions on how to use that in our brokerage?
You can see Matthew or myself.
Okay. So in our West office, for sure, Matthew and Najee, take care of that, and Don Mills in downtown. Melissa.
Yeah, and Shawnee can help them.
And Shawnee would be able to help you in the Don Mills and the downtown offices. So for you guys, your mission is, if you don't have one, get yourself into a platform like that to help with the system, the management, the follow-up, and the keeping in touch with people. Very critical for you. Next one, systems are paramount. Again, I'm using the word system. It's like batting at a dead cat here, dead horse with this one. But you need to have it. And why? Because it's going to create an effective and efficient business for you, and it's going to be able to help you manage the business for the 6 C's. We talked about the 6 C's last night. Just to refresh very quickly: contact, communicate, convert, contract, cash in, and chart. This is the part where we are always needing improvement. Follow up and keep in touch. You know, keeping in touch with your past clients, your relationships is an amazing thing. Let's just say you have a bad day. You're not feeling like you're moving forward, and so you feel a little bit beat up. There's nothing like calling a past client that thinks the world of you to perk you up. I used to do that all the time. So if I had a tough day, it's like, man, I feel like I took 10 steps backwards instead of 1 or 2 forward. I would dip into the database and make an extra call to somebody that I knew that just absolutely loved me. And so when I finished my day, I finished it on a high note. You really should be with those past clients, talking to them. It's not about calling, hey, you know, Najee, it's Mike, just wanted to touch base, see if you were thinking of selling, buying, or do you have anybody that would refer? It's not that kind of call, right? It's a relationship call. Hey, Najee, what did you think about the Leaf game last night? What did you think about the Raptors game? You know, you have a conversation with people. Najee is going to always, in that conversation, bring it back to our sector. We're the most talked about thing in Canada, pretty much, real estate. If you put in Google real estate Canada, the amount of articles you're going to find on a weekly, daily basis are off the charts, right? So you call Najee, talk to Najee about the Raptors, about Leafs, whatever you like, or whatever your connection is, right? He's going to bring it back to real estate. You're ready to have a conversation about that. And then that's when you can slip in, hey, listen, if you know of anybody at your work that might be interested in buying, selling real estate, pass my name along. Or better yet, would you mind giving me their name and I can reach out to them? Always stay in touch. Next one, sources of buyers. We're going to break this down to each one of these segments. These are basically for lead generation. Last week, I told you what your job was in real estate because you wake up unemployed every day. Your job in real estate is to do 1, lead generation. Lead gen. 2, book appointments. 3, close on a contract. Those are your 3 big primary responsibilities and job functions as a realtor. So if we're going to lead generation on buyer sides, these are the ways you can start doing that or look at. You're probably, in taking this course, you're probably already doing some of these. If you're not, no problem. Pick a couple of them. And that earlier slide where we talked about the immigration, the baby boomers and the echo boom generation, pick one of those as well as one of those sectors you're going to focus in on. So we're going to dig into a little bit deeper these ones, but these are the top ones. So as you heard me say last week, sphere of relationships. That's key. That should be the primary source of all of your leads in your business. Open houses, proactive open houses, proactive web-based. So that's internet, social media. You're going to see, as mentioned last week, the AI technology with things like ChatGPT, which is going to be Microsoft-based, and Bard, which is a Google platform that Google's now coming to the game to try and get ahead of Microsoft because they're trailing behind. Social networking, traditional advertising, I'll talk about that, and I'm going to actually share with you the response rate for flyers and newspapers. When you see that slide and that number, you may want to rethink doing a lot of that. Cold call, warm calls, education events, education community sponsorship, which I was very, by the way, heavily invested in as a realtor. Lots of community, lots of sponsorship, and lots of speaking events. I used to go speak to chambers of commerce and local groups just to educate them on the process of real estate. The more I talked about real estate, the better I got at knowing my job. And you make mistakes, of course. You sometimes may say the wrong thing, but you'll learn from your mistakes, right? If you don't try something, you'll never know whether you're good at it, and you don't want to have any regrets on not trying something. All right, so the first one, sphere of influence. Here's how I look at it. Develop the list. We talked about that last week. Segment that list into these groups. Remember, I talked about these are the primary three. This one's good, and this one. Does everybody remember what the D stood for? Out of curiosity. Oh, drip.
Steve says drip.
No, Steve, we're going to say delete those people because those are the people that are going to drain you of your energy. They are the vampires of the realtor. They're going to right. They're going to suck that life force out of you. Your A plus is A's and B's. This is about quality of people. This has got some quantity in it in people. What I'm going to tell you to do is most of your money and resources invested in these two segments. Your A pluses and A's. So if you're looking at what you're allocating for marketing, and I gave you my marketing budget that I used to use in my business last week, if you're setting up a marketing allocation budget to spend in that sector, the marketing sector, you should invest most of that here because these are people that know you, like you, and trust you already. I'll say those words again. You'll hear them a lot with trainers in real estate. Know you, like you, and trust you. I actually change the word like to love because the A pluses absolutely love you. The A pluses are your walking, talking billboards. So these are the people you want to really focus in on. This one here, Steve did have a word he used, drip. That's what I would say to you, Steve, and to others, that the C client is where you want to invest in a drip campaign. But now that I've said that, what's my definition of each sector? Because that might be helpful for you to understand. An A plus and an A are your relationship clients that are absolutely going to use you under any circumstances. You're their go-to realtor. That's my definition of these two. This one here has a little bit more in that the fact that they will go out of their way at every single instance to refer you in any opportunities they're going to be presented with. So maybe they're at a party and they hear across the room someone talking about buying real estate. It's like they've got a radar for the word real estate, and you as the realtor, they're going to go put themselves in that conversation. We're going to go there and say, you're thinking about buying real estate, but you've got to use my realtor. When you have somebody that calls you my realtor, that's an A plus. That's also an A, but the A is not maybe going to be likely to go interject themselves into that conversation, okay? But they're both always going to use you. A B is most likely going to use you, okay? What does that mean? 70 to 80% chance they're going to use you, but you got to stay in touch with them. Follow up, like we talked about in the surveys. If you don't, they have perceived indifference, folks. You do not care about them in their mind. You might care the world for them, but by you not following up, staying in touch, in their mind, they think, oh, you really were in it just for the fee. The C's. The C's are unlikely to use you. To me, that's in the 25% and less. Truthfully, I'm going to even say it's 15% or less is the C category. Doesn't mean you throw them out with the bathwater, to use that expression, but it means that you don't invest as much in them in follow-up. So you put them on a drip style campaign, and maybe instead of trying to reach out to them 18 or 24 times a year, or say 30, 36, maybe it's 8 or 12 times a year. You make a call, or they get some kind of content from you. but content that's not going to cost you a lot. In fact, probably content that's not going to cost you anything. It'll be part of a drip campaign and a thing like Agent Locator or Sphere. So those are my definitions of the 5. I didn't give them to you last week, but now that you understand the definitions of what they look like, now hopefully you can allocate your resources financially in money and in time to where you think you're going to get the most return. Next, here we go. Qualify. What's their financial? And I use these 2 big words, not big words, but words in our business: capacity and capability. So when you're qualifying people on finance, you want to think of those 2 things. What's their capacity to purchase and what's their capability to purchase? They seem like maybe the same word, but they're actually different meanings. You're going to want to look at those 2 things. Motivation. Number 1 for me is always, what's their time motivation? If they're looking at buying in 2 years, 700 days from now, I'm probably not investing, 24/7 time with them right now, because we've got a time difference in motivation. If their motivation to buy is in 30 to 90 days, I'm all over them. All over them. I'm wrapping my arms around them like there's no tomorrow, because I don't want them to see something on realtor.ca or see something wherever and they go and buy it without me being a part of the mix. Again, to follow up the staying in touch with people. Create a method of how and at what frequency you'll communicate with them. So how can we communicate with people? Well, we have these great phones we can pick up, we can call them, we have email, we have chat like FaceTime, and we have all these types of great tools that are there. We have email, however, and we have in person. Let's say that one too. My 2 favorite are calls and in person. Remember one of those words we used last week? It was called pop by. Instead of appointment, we changed the word appointment to pop by. So in person, we call those pop bys. You go, and every day I used to have on my list, and in my trunk, I had all these little gifts that I would give people. And I would set up a distribution every day where I would drop off 2 or 3 things each week. So 15 times, there's 15 contacts that week that I made. And in the summertime, I'd get like mustard, ketchup, and relish. And I'd say, hey, listen, I know you're a big barbecuer, Najee. Here's the mustard, relish, and ketchup. I wanted to first be here to catch up with you. So I relish the time we spend together. And not every realtor can cut the mustard like me. So I'd say something corny like that, right? And to give them the little pack. And it was something they would remember, right? Like, oh, Mike brought me this little, and you don't have to buy the big ones. You can buy like the small little packs. But it made an impression with them. And every year they came to expect me dropping off their little thing for the barbecue season. So I'd make those rounds probably in April or May, which kind of coincides with this thing called the spring market that we had, right? Where people start thinking more about that. So March, April, May, Mike used to come out with the ketchup, relish, and mustard. Just a little kind of, I didn't invent that one, by the way. I found that from somebody else like 25 years ago, but I ran with it and it was a very successful thing. What frequency? That's where we talk about 18 to 24 times or 30 to 36. Develop consistency and growth. So I got into the habit. Remember I talked about last week about fracturing these old habits. You got to break them like a compound fracture of your bones, and then you got to mend them. And you're talking 120 to 200 days to actually fracture a habit, old one, and develop a new one. So you guys get into the trenches, start doing this stuff, and then start measuring the results of what you're getting. Believe me, focusing in on this sector with those types of deliverables, you're going to get referrals rolling in big time. You will develop for each one in your database. My guess is between 1 and 2 referrals per contact of A+ and A+ in your database. That doesn't mean you're doing a deal, 1 or 2 from each one of those referrals, but you have the opportunity to do a deal. And that's all you can ever ask for. Any questions on that? Sphere of influence, again, my #1 source of business. Our brokerage advocates as the #1 source of business for you, that sector. Don't be distracted by all the little shiny balls or new ideas. Some of them are great, but this should be the focus and foundation of your business. Then you can bolt on some of the shiny ideas that will work for you. Next, we got open houses was another sector, right, that we looked at. My first transaction, actually my first transaction was not open house. It was a walk-in in 1992. Well, my second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, probably up to my 16th or 7th transaction, open houses. Now, we've just come through COVID. There was a lack of opportunity to do a lot of open houses, unfortunately, but now we're back into the opportunities to do these. Do them. I have some caveats for you to do them. I always recommend you do an open house with another colleague. Why? Because of this. The world's changed. It's not like it was when I started 30 years ago. Today, you got to be mindful of your own safety and security. That should be prime number one in your mind, your safety, security. And then all the rest of the things that you're going to service the listing for, knowing the neighborhood, knowing similar listings that have sold, that have expired in the area, that are currently active, knowing what the interest rates are for this property, and maybe creating some kind of financial sheets as far as, well, if you buy, here's the list price, and if you get a 5-year fixed at this interest rate, here's your payment structure. At a 25-year AM, at a, say, a 20-year AM, here's what it would look like if you're, so you're giving people information because you're becoming knowledgeable about that particular property. Be prepared. That's part of being prepared. Here's what I always ask people when they came in the door. Are you working with another realtor? Do you currently have a buyer representation agreement with the realtor? These are must-ask questions because you do not want to get involved in a conversation or potentially working with somebody that's under contract with another brokerage. That would be what's called in legal terms, inducing a breach of a contract. If you induce a breach of a contract, not only are you going to be in trouble with RICO, if they perform an investigation to determine that, but you could possibly, if you went on and did a transaction, you'd be having worked for free because there'll either be a lawsuit against you to claim the fee back or an arbitration case at TREP. So you always want to establish these two big things right there. Are you working with a realtor? Have you signed a buyer agency agreement? Because if they say yes to this, that's okay. That's why you follow up with this question. If they don't have a buyer representation agreement, there's no fiduciary relationship established. If they say no, they have not, then they're actually fair game. So that's why I always ask the two questions. Are you working with a realtor? And in the consumer's mind, it could be, oh yeah, now she took me out. But he doesn't have any loyalty or allegiance or contract with Najee. Follow up with the second question. Have you signed anything with Najee? Something, and I always had in my open house, all the contracts, something, you pull it out. Here's the buyer agency agreement. Have you signed it? Oh no, I've never signed anything. He's just a nice guy. He likes the Raptors. I like the Raptors. We go and we talk about the Raptors, but I'm not, committed to him. Perfect window of opportunity for you now to work with them and get them and secure them as a client for yourself. Any questions on that? That's number 2 for sources of buyer leads, open houses. Again, if you're newer in the business, and I say newer in the business, anywhere between 5 years and under, you should be working lots of open houses. How many weeks are there in a year?
52.
How many weekends are there in a year?
52. What weekend days? Talk about 104.
I know I'm being really simplistic when I say this, but I actually literally would map this out every year as part of my plan. So I know I have 52 weeks. I know there's weekend wise, there's actually there's more than that, Najee.
For the days of the weekend. Yeah, Saturday, Sunday, 52 weeks times 2, 4.
There's 4, right? That number is way higher, right? Saturday, so we're saying Saturday, Sundays, right? How many Saturday and Sundays? I'll ask the question easier. So we got 52 weeks. How many Saturday, Sundays are in 52 weeks? We'll go for an average. We'll say there's 4 Saturdays and 4 Sundays. There's actually more, right? So there's actually 8 8 times 52.
It's
It's gonna be 4 something, right?
416.
That's how many open house opportunities you have in a year. Don't tell me you don't have the time to find one out of those 416 days to do an open house. To let you know, I never did 416 because I didn't work every week and every weekend, but I was probably running 200 to 250 open houses. That's the kind of coverage I had on my listings. So I would do them, I'd have other people do them because I had more than one listing. And so I always wanted to be in the marketplace. I had my own little farm area. We had coverage. We made sure that we were always there in the marketplace. So, you know, when you're looking at building out your plan for this particular sector of developing leads for buyers, figure out how many open houses you want to do. And here's a secret I'll give you, folks. Don't wait for the office that you belong to's email to say, hey, John Smith has an open house available. First agent, please call. You've probably seen those emails. You're going to be in competition with whoever can click back faster to get that email. And believe you me, a lot of people click back and try to get that email or that open house. Here's my little secret to you. What's this stand for again? I taught you that last week.
Oh, but come into office.
Come into who? Amber? Beautiful, Amber. Fantastic. Come into office. How about you as a realtor? Come into the office that you belong to and start networking and developing relationships with realtors right here. Actually, one of the things I did not list as a buyer lead source or seller lead source is realtors. Your own peers here in the office, the very successful ones, don't have the time or team manpower, woman power to facilitate all their leads and opportunities. If you come into the office as a realtor and become friends with some of these top producing agents, they get to know you, like or love you, and trust you. Guess what they're going to do when they have an open house? They're not going to go to Najee or Matt or Catherine and say, can you put this email out? I got an open house. No, they're going to pick up the phone and call you directly and say, I got this open house. Would you be interested? Wouldn't that be an amazing opportunity for you? If you're struggling right now, looking at, I don't have any leads right now, ask yourself, well, you're coming into the office and developing friendships, relationships with realtors in your own midst. If the answer is no, you may want to change that a little bit. Get out, come in, get the friendships going, and start it now. Today is what, February 17th, right?
February 17th.
Okay, today's February 17th. You're going to start to see in a month and a half, open houses opening up again, big time, floodgates for them. At the worst, 2 months from now. Don't you want to be ahead of the curve? Get in, get to know people, and get those calls? Because people are like, well, I haven't seen any calls anymore on open houses. Right, because people are calling people they know, like, and trust. Pretty simple. Any questions on that? It's always a good thing. Develop relationships inside your office, because that was my secret to getting all those open houses. I told you, from like 2 to 15, my second to 15, 16, 17 sales were open houses. They weren't my listings. I didn't have listings when I was 22 years old and first started. But I went to the office, got to know all the people there, and I bugged people. Hey, do you have any extra open houses? I asked. Proactive selling. It's amazing what people will do to help you out, and you're helping them out, right? Next, internet. It's not my forte or specialty because internet-based lead generation was not where it is today, where it was when I left the business, although I did have some investments in that, but it was very minor investments I didn't use. What is it?
Services, yeah, 400.
4, 8. It's 8 times, it should be 8 times 52, right?
The weeks in the year, 52 days, 2 times 52 should be around 104.
All right. Why was I saying 400? There's something else I was doing then.
Maybe some more math.
Yeah. No. Oh, I know what it was.
Yeah.
I used to do open houses during the week.
Oh, during the week.
Yeah. So back then, we had these things called agent caravans. And so agent caravans would run Monday to Friday. And so that was agents open houses, not consumer open house. So I was doing those too. That's why I always had in my mind, there's 400 times to do that. Because I would sell sometimes at the agent caravans when I was sitting the open house for the caravan. I would actually get an agent to bring an offer just by being there. So they were able to see it, pre-see it for their client, then take their client that night and do the deal. That's why I was having 400. Good, thanks for pointing that out. That's what happens when you get older. And I think your brain sometimes doesn't fire on all cylinders. Anyways, internet, 93%. This is an older number. We're probably like 98% now of everybody's on the internet. My parents are in their 80s. And so now my mom's discovered the internet the last couple of years. Worse, she's discovered Facebook. So my mom private messaged me all the time. And, you know, she sees that I'm online because you get the little green thing. So you can't ignore mom when she sees that. So most consumers are on the internet, even our baby boom generation and seniors. Buyers want to learn about the home buying process. Online content, they compare with their friends. Listen, our business is the most, as I said earlier, talked about sector in the economy. There's not a day that goes by that there's not a news article, a story on TV about our business. And so people are taking that information in. I talked to you last night about being the source and voice of real estate. You want to make sure you get this content. And if you're putting content out there on the internet, you want to make sure it's vetted, it's accurate, it's true, because that is leaves a permanent footprint out there. If you put something out there, even though you delete it, my understanding is that it's still in some format still exists out there. What's that?
In the ether somewhere.
In the ether, as Najee said. Listing content is critical, it needs to be current, accurate, and navigable. This is the talk that they use. SEO stands for search engine optimization. That's where people are using keywords to get higher rankings. Of course, you know, the real way to do SEO is money, spending money with the web browsers like Google and whatnot is where you're going to get up on the front couple pages. And you need to be on the first couple pages in the search if you're looking for people you don't know. That's internet. Next is networking. Get involved. So what do you like to do? I put in a couple of things. Do you like to golf? Do you like to run? Do you like hobbies? Volunteer. I did a lot of that. Community opportunities. Do business conferences. Cool story about how I became a broker and manager with Royal LePage and Royal LePage Canada. I was a sales guy, and in 2002, I went to the Royal LePage conference in Halifax and met, believe it or not, Phil Soper, who was not the CEO and president of Royal LePage at the time. He was a general manager with our relocation division. And so we were on a event, a pub crawl, the night before the conference was to end. And there was a group of us in each group of 60, 70 people going from one location to another. And Phil and I and a couple other people got to know each other through the evening. And then the last part of the evening, we were helping people, the older realtors, get across the street, stopping traffic, being good Samaritans, Boy Scouts. The next morning, he became the president of Royal LePage. He got promoted. He knew he was getting promoted. He never said nothing to anybody. And I remember at that closing ceremony looking at him, oh, I know that guy. He was the guy I was out with. Anyways, 4 years later, I'm being offered a position with Royal LePage Canada from Phil and a fellow named Gino Romanesi, who was the vice president of the company. So these things do work. Immediately, though, I was getting referrals from other RLP realtors. So I went to that conference with a mindset to meet as many people as I could. And I did. It made it my proactive mission to get to know people. And within the first 2 months being back, I generated 2 or 3 leads from people from across Canada referring into the GTA. My expenses were more than paid for. In fact, I was in profit central. And I just built that business for the next 3-4 years until I transitioned into a broker management. So you have opportunities. This last September, I believe, they were in Winnipeg. They do this sales conference every 2 years. I highly recommend you try our Royal LePage sales conference. They have only gone out of Canada once. That was for the 100th anniversary. They went to Vegas. Every other time it's somewhere here in Canada. The NAR conference, I literally just did the NAR conference in November. This one gets 20 to 30,000 realtors attending. The Royal LePage ones are probably about 1,000 to 1,200. This one is 20 to 30,000 people. It's insane. It's a conference on steroids. I've only gone to a few of them in my career, but if you really want to experience what it's like to be around that many realtors, I recommend you try NAR. NAR for this year, 2023, will be in Anaheim. If you have young kids, you can go to visit Disneyland, right? Or Disney World, whatever. I always confuse the two, the Orlando and the Anaheim one. NAR this year is in Anaheim. If you have the resources, highly, highly recommend it. I will be there myself for that conference. Realtor Quest, if you are a TREB member and you do not go to this, shame on you. This is free. It's local. They usually have it at one of the conference centers by the airport. I think it's the Toronto Congress Center on Dixon Road, I think is the address. Again, I'll use the word, it's free. And it's literally the biggest conference of any kind in Canada. The opportunities to network and bump into your fellow signature realtors and other realtors is huge. Take advantage of that. Rebar is actually gone, but it's things like this. We have this thing called the Buzz Conference now. A lady named Virginia Munden runs that as a opportunity. So I actually had to change my slide because it's no longer called Rebar. Get out there, meet your fellow realtors. They are, as I said before, there are opportunities to network with and do referrals and get business from. Professional groups, we have people right here in our office that are Toastmasters taking that course. They belong to the Board of Trade. I belong to the Mississauga Board of Trade. Go to the events once a month, all the time. And last month we had Premier Doug Ford there with a couple of ministers, which was great. And politics, get yourself involved if you can locally at a municipal level or provincial. But I would focus on a municipal level because that's most going to affect the day-to-day business that you're running. In fact, here in Mississauga, this morning I got a call from Mayor or email from Mayor Comby. They're opening up a whole bunch of new task force and committees. The number one she's striking right now is on diversity, hatred, racism, and inclusivity. What an amazing opportunity. If you live in Mississauga or you have or operate a business in Mississauga, you can volunteer to be on that committee, and it's a 4-year commitment. We're all talking about this stuff. It's all this global community we're all belonging to. Effective buyer closing questions. Your goal should be, and we know the term, come into the office. We want them to come into the office. Why are we doing that? Well, they're going to prove to us by coming in that they're serious buyers, they're legitimate buyers, and there's a safety component for you that you're going to meet them for the first time in the safety of your office. Hopefully that makes sense to a lot of people. I taught you this close last week. The sharp close combined with the alternative choice close. This is how you book a appointment with people. You can do this for sellers as well. So it'd be like, hey, Najee, if I could show you how I could find you the perfect home in the least amount of time, would you be interested in hearing more about that?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Najee, what would be a good time to meet? Would tonight at 6 o'clock work or tomorrow at 7 o'clock work better for you?
Tomorrow at 7.
Tomorrow at 7. Perfect. I've put you in. If you have to call and change, please give me a call. So I have very simple, psychologically triggering kind of questions where they're going to agree yes, and they're going to agree yes to an appointment. They may say, sorry, I have to get back to you. You could have thrown that at me. No, I got to get back to you. No problem, Najee. Why don't I pencil you in tomorrow at 7? If you have to change, call me back and we'll make that change. But I'm trying to do the booking the appointment, right? I put this in red here at the bottom as well. You need to practice and develop dialogues and scripts. Dialogues and scripts. That doesn't mean that you're going to sound like a robot doing. So I could do a bit robot. Najee, if I could show you how to, I'm reading, right? Show you how I could sell your home or buy your home with you, your dream home would you be interested in finding, like, so people know I'm reading a script. You make it internal, right? You practice those dialogues. You become an Academy Award actor or actress in delivering the script. Because believe it or not, we're surrounded by scripts in our lives, whether you like it or know it. Your kids are pulling scripts on you on a daily basis. They're the best salespeople in the world. If they want a toy or they want something, shoes or whatever, they're the most persistent, follow-up, stay in touch people you'll ever meet. They won't stop until they get what they want. You got to be the same thing. The better questions you ask, the higher the likelihood you're going to convince them to work with you. Now, the book that you've been given, some of you have a hard copy, others electronic. In the back of the book, there's tons of scripts for you guys to learn, right? There's so many more on top of what you see there, but start there. Start somewhere and pick the ones that you most think would be practical for you. Because at the end of the day, the questions that you're going to come across, they're pretty much all the same. Once you understand, there's probably 8 or 10 standard questions you're going to get asked. And for each one of those, you have 2 or 3 responses. So you only have to memorize like 25 or 30 types of scripts. Pretty easy. But I said to you last week, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. Don't go and try and learn 30 scripts this week or in the 5 weeks we're together. Take the next 6 months, practice, get up to 10, get up to 15, 20, get up to 30. Because believe me, you develop those for those 10 questions, those 8 questions, you're going to be ripping it. You're going to be fantastic. Seat of the buyer, come into the office. You need to establish why it's imperative for the buyer to meet with you. If not, they're going to be making a great mistake. You'll be making a great mistake. And I hate to say the word grave, but you may find yourself to be in a grave. People are assaulted. And sadly, there's been people that have been murdered. We actually had last year, the son of the realtor that was murdered, abducted, kidnapped and abducted, and held captive for 4 or 5 days, I believe. I might have the numbers off. And then ultimately, the kidnappers who wanted a ransom, they murdered his mother, a realtor, I'm going to say somewhere in the south. I actually met the son in person because we had him on our Zoom thing with Signature Live. I met him in person at NAR last year in Orlando, and I went up and thanked him for the presentation to remind us not to make those mistakes with people that call that want to go have you show a property, and you think in your mind, I'm going to make $20,000 tonight. No. Make sure you protect yourself first and foremost. I'm huge about that, folks. Like, I cannot impress that enough upon you. I do not want to go to anybody's a bedside at a hospital or, God forbid, worse, a funeral. Next one, traditional advertising. We talked about this earlier, and I was going to give you the actual response rate. I'll go right to the bottom. If you are doing traditional advertising, that is a newspaper ad or a flyer, this is the response rate you're going to get according to Canada Post on flyers. On flyers, 0.005%. That is actually the Canada Post response rate from years ago, like not even current, because it's worse than that today. I didn't even want to give you the current one because I think there's another 0 there. So if you're spending, every month you're going to put out, let's say your farm area is 1,000 homes. Right now to deliver that piece, to produce the piece and deliver, I think your unaddressed ad mail is running you about 11, 12 cents. Is that about right? Yeah, about that. Probably costing you 10 cents, whatever it is. So you're probably 25 cents per flyer. If you're doing 1,000, do the math. You're doing 3,000, do the math. You're doing 10,000, do the math. It's a lot of money. And if you're spending that kind of money and this is the only response rate you're getting, is it really worth you to do that? And why? Because all these things are embedded in the reason. I will tell you, you can magnify and multiply this and make it better. And the only way you're going to do that is by a couple of things. One, so what you've done here is you created a farm, right? So you've got a farm. The first thing you need to do is to door knock. If you're not prepared to door knock into a neighborhood and you're flyering it for buyers or for sellers, I'm telling you right now, don't do it. because this is your way of them seeing you in person after you've delivered flyers. If you're delivering flyers, it's got to be consistent. And what do I mean by that? You got to set up 6 months minimum of delivery of your flyers. So you have to commit yourself to 6 months minimum. And what does that look like? Your first month, every week you're sending a flyer. Every week. Your second week, every week you're sending a flyer. Your third week, every week. Third week, you're sending a flyer. Fourth week, you're sending a flyer. So the first month, every week, you're sending a flyer. Guess what? In month 2, you're doing the same thing. In month 3, you're doing the same thing. Month 4 or 5, you may be able to take 1 week off, but I don't recommend it. So you're doing it every week. And in month 6, you're doing every week. If you don't have the constitution to do that, don't do it, because your flyer is not being recognized, it's being pitched. If you think that one flyer once a month is going to get your results, if you don't door knock, and the other thing that you want to do is community events.
Steve shares a bit about himself here. He says door knocking is his new religion.
Oh, awesome.
He's seeing results after a month, and it's been psychologically lifting for him.
I love it. We have here in our office a guy named Alex Abramoff. He's won the top 35 under 35 award with Royal LePage. So the top 35 realtors in Canada for Royal LePage that are under 35. He's won it 3. He's been a winner 3 years in a row, right? He is a door knocking machine. This guy doesn't care if it's 2 feet of snow that has just come down. He goes out when he wants to and knocks doors. I won't tell you what he makes, but he is 7 figures, north of 7 figures. Door knocking. Does it work? Of course it works. So Steve, I'm so pleased to hear this is a religion of yours. Community events. So actually this weekend's Family Day. And in our area, we have, where I live right now, we have, I live in North Brampton, I'm up in Heart Lake. We have, I'm living on a conservation beside a park. And we have the city have built a big hockey arena. It's a tradition for the last 20, 30 years where we have ice skating Family Day event. Now, Family Day is a newer kind of, I think, holiday, last 15 years or so. But we always did something in February, and I always sponsored like the Tim Hortons hot chocolate and Timbits and all that kind of stuff. And it's become so popular. Now, I don't even sell anymore, right? But I still participate in it. That last year we had the mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown, show up with, my wife came into the house. So we live right beside the hockey rink down at the park, right? Oh, there's a couple of former NHL guys that I just talked to out in the front. And we have a couple of dogs. I'm like, really? Who? Oh, they're just walking across our front lawn. I look at it, it's Doug Gilmore and Wendell Clark. So, I used to sponsor that event. Don't do it anymore because I don't sell anymore. But that thing started, 20 some odd years ago because I started it. And now it has a life of its own. Can you start something like that? And if you're going to do flyers, you better do this. It's a big package deal. Because if you are thinking you're going to throw on a dartboard a dart of a flyer and hit the bullseye one time, not going to happen. If everybody's played darts, stand back 20 feet from a dartboard with a dart and try and hit a bullseye. That's the chance you're going to get. That's a likelihood of success if you hit a bullseye with that dart. Ain't going to happen. You really have to invest the time, energy, and sadly, money behind that. And the cost is probably 25 cents a fly. Door knock, door knock, door knock. And Steve, I'm so happy to hear that you have a newfound religion in door knocking. So cool. Where are we here? We want to go to qualifying buyers. What is their motivation? That's really a time thing we talked about. Are they working with another realtor? Are they just going out looking with another realtor? Is that other realtor really a glorified taxi cab or Uber driver, but doesn't have a buyer representation agreement? If they don't have the buyer agency agreement, they're fair game. What are their needs and wants? What are they looking for? Need-wise, maybe they have a 3-bedroom right now and the wife is pregnant, so they're going to need a 4th. So they're going to need an extra bedroom. What would they want? Well, everybody wants their Taj Mahal, but do they have the capacity and capability to deliver on that? Qualify them before you show properties. And when I say qualify them, make sure that you're qualifying them financially. So if you're working with a mortgage broker or a lender, that's part of your team. You got to get that person introduced to this prospect ASAP before you take them out, because you don't want to be disappointed. They don't want to be disappointed that they can't afford the property. I say this, actually, don't be an over-glorified Uber driver or taxi cab service. Sadly, you guys are all at home and not here. So I brought actually the binder that I used to give to my buyers in a buyer interview. If you're ever in the office here in the West End and you want, and I'm here, pop in and I'll let you browse through it. But this was something that I made up for every buyer. We have our buyer books here that you can use, but I created my own. And the first thing you see that they flip to is my agenda. So I actually had an agenda that I worked with them because I wanted their time to be spent wisely, right? So if you're ever, like I said, if you're ever here, come on in, I'll pop in and let you see it. And it's food for thought for you to create something unique that distinguishes you and separates you from everybody else. And I used to give them that as part of the meeting presentation. Invest your time in prospects that have a financial position to purchase. That's common sense right there. Working with a realtor. This is all the stuff under our act. It's now called TRESA. That name change is going to happen officially, I believe, in April. Stands for Trust in Real Estate Services Act. I was big time part of the lobbying with that. In fact, when the legislation got passed in the Ontario legislature at Queen's Park, I was one of the 40 realtors selected to be in the legislature when that legislation got passed. In fact, the AREA video that sits on their website that shows those 40 people, I'm in the second row. So I'm like, you see me walking in, and this realtor tried to bump me out of the screen. And being a hockey player, I gave her a little shoulder check and almost put her on her butt. But you know, not my problem. She was trying to take my thunder. I'm joking. I'm teasing. Anyhow, you do need to know the regulations, folks, because here's one of the things that's coming out of TRESA. RICO is going to be much more punitive in its fining and regulatory side for us as realtors. What does that mean? We got to know our stuff. We cannot be operating in the gray area. There's not going to be many more warnings that you're going to see from RICO. They're going to be fines, suspensions, and revocations of licenses. You're going to start to see that ramp up probably second half of this year and certainly into next year and going forward. So please, folks, know what you're doing with regards to the regulation part. Needs and wants. We talked about this stuff, but this was one of those questions that I used to ask in a market like we find ourselves, particularly right now. So we're out shopping with a buyer, and that buyer is looking at two things in their mind. They're either wanting a big bargain, they want a big deal, or do they want to get the property? And if you're dealing with somebody that is stuck on the bargain side of things, ask them that question politely, not sarcastically or with animosity. Say, what's more important to you? Getting the property you really want for your family, like we're checking off all those bargains, those boxes, or are you just looking for a bargain? Like, help me out understand so I can better then tailor make our experience together. Right now in the market we find ourselves, you're going to have lots of buyers that's what they're focused on, the bargain. My personal thought right now is that we still have another month or two where buyers are, by and large, they have the advantage. We're about 3 to 4 months of inventory in the market, which gets us into that kind of bounce to buyer market. But what I'm hearing, and I heard it twice already before I started the class today, I've heard it nonstop all week. There's multiple offers happening again. There's activity. And what that signals to me is that those people that have waited for the last 7, 8, 9 months to make a decision are now having to make the decision, because regardless of what's happening with our interest rates or the economy, things happen in people's lives that cause them to have to transact in real estate. People retire, lose jobs, people get promoted in jobs, pregnancies, relocations, health. These are all things that no matter what, they happen to people's lives. Well, you may be able to postpone or delay for a while. But ultimately, if you think about it, it's like the avalanche. Eventually, when something lets go, it all starts to go. So right now with your buyers, my thought is you're before the avalanche is going to happen. We've probably got another month or two before the spring market kicks in, and people that were sitting on the fence, holding back, will have no choice but to get into the marketplace. So if you have buyers right now that you're struggling with, that are hesitant to make a decision, I would have this kind of conversation with them. Particularly if your buyers have a long-term horizon for their purchase. And I mean long-term is anything more than 5 years. We're not talking flips, right? If they're sitting with where they're going to buy and they're going to be there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right now is a brilliant time for them to get into the market, I think, personally. Because time will level out any possible subsequent drop we may experience. If we drop, a couple more percent, which I'm not advocating we're going to do, it's possible. But they're going to be there for 20 years, right? Have that serious conversation with them. What kind of lending products are they looking at? My guess is they should be looking probably like at a 2-year, probably fixed right there. There's some great deals they can get at the lenders for that. I don't think I touched variable yet, and I certainly wouldn't be going 5-year fixed right now, because I think in 2 to 3 years, we're going to see that variable rate come back down. They're locked into a 2-year fixed. Then they have the option to slide into that variable. Again, this is why you want to have that team behind you, the lender, the lawyer, the building inspector, an accountant. Have this big team, stager as part of your team. If you don't have one, folks, get out there and get that team behind you. That's the question we asked. Buyer policies, determine when and where to meet. Take charge of the narrative. Have an agenda. I was one slide ahead of presenting my book. Sorry for that. That's the book. That's the book. And in that book, I give helpful tips and stuff. Guys, you can find stuff online for free and create your own. That's also a brag book, is what some people would talk about. It's my resume or CV, my history, testimonials, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. And then the agenda pieces. And in here, by the way, as I said before, we did talk about the financial capacity capabilities. We want to get them qualified. But I also included all the forms that are in that you need to have them sign. So I literally gave them a copy, for instance, of the buyer representation, buyer representation agreement. So Najee, listen, I want you to be able to take this home and read this, because it's 3 pages long. Have a read of this. If you have any questions before you sign it, give me a call and we'll figure that out. Because I'll make it, and I had it as my let's make a deal. Let's make a deal. Ultimately, we have to enter into this binding agreement. This is the paperwork here, right? I'm going to get you to autograph it, because I want to be your fiduciary relationship. I want to make sure that I have your interests in mind. If we don't do that, then I actually work for the seller under what's called sub-agency, and I don't want to do that. It means that you can't tell me anything confidential. If you do, I'm bound to actually tell the seller that. Under a buyer agency agreement, I represent you. Everything you say to me is confidential. So take that home. And here's the deal. I'll take you out and show you a couple properties based upon what we've discussed here. At the end of that, you're going to have seen me in action. I'll talk to you a few more times. I'm going to ask you a simple question, Najee. Are you willing to have me as your realtor for this transaction, hopefully for life? Is that a deal?
Absolutely.
Right?
Deal.
So it takes the stress off of you having to get them to sign. I didn't like them to have to sign right then and there. If they were willing to, obviously I would. Right? If they were from an A+ client, they would sign right then and there. No problem. I'm talking about somebody that's maybe like a B or a C, that you're going to have to work on them. They're going to have to get to know you, like you, and trust you. That's a good way for you not to push something in front of them where they're, having to sign something they haven't read. And listen, only once in my entire career, her name was Gladys. She was an old Scottish lady, and I took her out to do a couple of showings of the condo, and she didn't sign the list as a buyer agency agreement. Only ever happened once, and believe it or not, I tried to resell her or dialogue script, and she just refused. And so I said to Gladys, and by the way, at that time, I never had people in my car anymore. I always went and met them at different properties, right? So Gladys didn't sign. We're standing in the parking lot of this condo, and I said to Gladys, listen, we made a deal. We shook on it. And unfortunately, even with my own family, we enter into these buyer agency agreements as paperwork. And so I'm not going to be able to help you. I hope, though, you're able to find a realtor that's going to be able to deliver for you, but it can't be me. I was thinking that was going to get her to go, okay, Mike. It didn't. She goes, no, that's I'm not going to sign. It's perfect. Just want to let you know that to get out of here, you just go here to the gatehouse, turn right, and you're gone. I got into my car, backed it up, left the condo, waved to her, and I never saw her again in my life. But for me, I had a bad experience where early in my career, 1994, Canada Day long weekend, I was up at our family cottage, my family, extended family, and I've been working with this guy. This guy had said, hey, there's a brand new listing. He called my cell phone on like the Saturday, and I need to see it on Sunday. So I made a decision that, okay, I'm going to drive down and 4.5 hours north in cottage country, well, actually north of cottage country, and came down, showed the guy the property. His name was Steve, actually, Steve. Not door knocking Steve here, but his name was Steve. And he drove a Suzuki Samurai Jeep back then. Anyways, I showed Steve the property, and Steve loved the property. And Steve said, I'm going to buy the property. I just want to go think about it. I'm going to go grab it at Tim Hortons, and I'll call you back. So I go back to my office. This is before computers, by the way, folks. We had typewriters to type our offers, okay? So I go back to my office, and I start having the secretary type up the offer. And I don't get a call from him in the hours. So I call him at about an hour and a half, 2 hours, right? Because now the offer's all fully typed. And Steve had gone and called the listing agent after I had showed it to him. And the listing agent, in that time that I thought he was at Tim Hortons, presented an offer for him and got accepted from the seller. So that was my kind of experience and life lesson to never, ever, ever work with somebody that I didn't sign up in a buyer agency agreement. No matter how much they were going to sell me on that they would use me, I wanted it in paper. So, take my experience and hopefully learn from it, because those people that are telling you that they're always going to use you and they would never do something like that to you, most won't. But the day you meet somebody that does it to you, it's devastating to you personally. And it hurt me personally, and it took me a while to get over it. But once I got over it, it made it so much easier for me to go, listen, Gladys, unfortunately, that's how I operate my business. We made a deal. I can't be of any more service or help to you. And I walked away, right? The agenda, there we go. So again, if anybody's in the office wants to see my booklet, it's like literally it's from my last year of selling. So it's, it's what, 16 years old, but there's still some great content there. Tracking systems, classify the buyers by the motivation on time. A will buy now, B will buy in 3 to 6 months, C will buy in 6 months or more. These are our deletes. We don't even want to have these on our list. Classified by source, where did they come from? Were they from family members? Were they, somebody had the same experience? It's very hard to get over it. Yeah. It's devastating, quite frankly. Like to have somebody do that to you, because I operate entirely by the golden rule. Do unto others as you have them do to you. I would never, ever do that to somebody else. And to have it done to you, and you're not the person to do it to somebody else, you just, you don't even want to get out and do the job anymore, right, of real estate. It took me a while actually to shed it. Like I was but something good came out of it, which was my principle and my moral compass to never work with somebody that wouldn't make a commitment. And what's the commitment? They're getting me, right? And if they didn't want to do that, to me, it was like, well, maybe they don't want to make a commitment. Maybe they want to play the field. Okay, go play the field. Just not with me. I don't want to be put in that position. So I never got that weekend back, right? And for me, I left my entire extended family up there, and it was sad, right? It was Canada Day long weekend. I came home on a Sunday morning. I had to get up at like 5 a.m. to be down to Toronto for my like 11 o'clock a.m. proper showing. So yeah, it was never again it happened. Yeah. Where are we here? Contacts, establish frequency, your method, in-person, phone, email, text, mail. You've also got the chat stuff, Facebook Live stuff. You can do that. Next one, market conditions. This is just the market conditions. So 4 months or more is a buyer's market. We're right on that kind of level. So buyer's market exceeds demand, supply exceeds demand. We're actually undersupplied still, right? It's only going to get worse. We need to build 1.5 million homes in the province over the next 10 years. And we had in our best year just over 100,000 built. So we're not even building enough in the best year ever to deal with the capacity issue that we have with 1.5 million homes we need. Hence the reason, as I said earlier, with the senior population that are underutilizing their property, maybe they can convert into a duplex or a triplex or a quad when they change the zoning laws, and you can get more supply on. But you're not going to get a sale out of it, but you're going to be helpful to the person. There are the laneway houses or garden houses. So out west, there's a company that has now created these beautiful garden homes. And I was in a seminar with that about a month and a half ago in BAM. This person is developing beautiful properties, and because they're adjusting the zoning, this in one particular instance that we saw, they put that property in the backyard of this elderly lady's house. She had lost her husband, but didn't want to leave the neighborhood and all the friends and connections, doctors and neighbors. So she lived in the back in this garden suite, which was 1,000 square feet. And she rented out the main house. So she was getting some income from the house. All the power and plumbing, by the way, was coming from the main house. So they trenched underground electrical and plumbing to the house. And so they showed this property, the lady, brilliant idea. It's not here in Ontario yet, but he's working towards getting everything approved here. So you're going to see that type of housing appear. Wouldn't it be great if you knew about that, became an expert in that, so people could call you, right? To help them get that knowledge. It's all about knowledge. Where are we here? Advanced preparation, know your neighborhood stats, simple stuff. Inspect all showings, all properties you're showing if you have the opportunity. So early in my career, I had the opportunity to do it because I wasn't as busy. But near the end of my career, I was too busy to inspect property. So if you do have that chance, go and have a look at the property before you show it. Be familiar with comparable properties. Be early, appropriately attired. Never enjoy watching people show up with flip-flops to showings or to offers. It just is not the right statement to show people that we're professional. Freehold properties, know how to access them, lock boxes, security systems. So we have different lock boxes in our market. We have the traditional dials one, like the A to Z. Sometimes we have the numbered push button ones, but we also have a thing called Central Lock. So Mississauga Real Estate Board and some of the ITSOS boards use these ITSOS systems. So you're going to have to learn or figure out how do you get access to that. So if you're going and showing properties in an ITSOS location, it could be Niagara Falls, Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, some places here in Mississauga, you'll have to get a actual lockbox code through the board. You'll have to pay for that. Stay with your buyers at all times, include attic, basements, and gardens. That's a RICO requirement for us. It's not, hey, go have free reign in the property. Or, you're with the family and their 2 kids. Well, the kids, hang out and watch TV. No, everybody's got to be together because we're responsible at the end of the day. Leave the property as you found it, lights, doors, and pets. And so pets here, I didn't realize I could use my finger. I'm probably going to do that with the pen. With pets, you'll see sometimes in listings that they say, please don't let out pets. And I'll give you a funny story for me. I was up in north of Bolton in Cedar, I think it's called Cedar Mills, state subdivision, couple acre properties. I think they were 2 to 3 acre lots in the state subdivision. And this one had, please do not let out 2 cats. So I was like, great, I've been ready for these cats. And so I get to this property, I have my buyers with me, and I'm like, hey guys, I got a couple cats I got to make sure I don't let out. And so I do the lockbox, I open the door slightly, and there's these 2 cats that are like maybe 10 feet away from me, sitting there, you know, mischievous things. I've got cats too, and dogs. And anyways, I thought, hey, cats, you know, I get down, and these things were like the Flash. They ran at me, and they one started initially over my shoulder, so I went to catch him. So I get up to catch him. He's over me, and the other one through my leg, and they're gone. On a 3-acre property, I'm like, holy cow, I'm in trouble. Not from not trying to block these guys. Anyways, I did the showing. Sorry, I tried to get the cats for like a half an hour. Then we did the showing, came back out, said to these buyers, look, I'm gonna have to cancel everything. I gotta get these cats back into the house. It took me another probably 40 minutes to get the cats back in. I had to coax them, and I got them in the house, and we canceled it. But so anyways, if they have pets, let your clients know, because some clients may be allergic to a cat or terrified of dogs. So ask your client, are you afraid of, you know, pets? Are you allergic to pets? So, or you'll have a funny story like mine. You'll live all the time. Stay with your buyers at all time. I'll tell you a funny story on that one. Realtor, it was up in Erin. He had bought a brand new Cadillac. It was called a Cadillac. It was like 95, 96. I think they called an STS. It was a brand new kind of Cadillac sports car type of thing. And he had this buyer that he was working with that had asthma, and he shoot his asthma stuff, but it was all a lark. It was all made up. He did not have asthma. He was pretending. And he's out showing a property in Erin, and the guy starts having an asthma attack. He's not, but he'd already built that fake thing up in the realtor's mind. Asked for the realtor's keys because he left his inhaler in the car. Took the realtor's key, and realtor lost his car. They found his car a couple weeks later in a pond. The kid, there's a kid, took it for a dry ride. So stay with your buyers all the time, and probably don't give them your keys unless you're a family member. Condos, know to access the property. People are buying condos for a lifestyle choice primarily. If you don't know where to show the amenities of the condo is, you better go find out, because people are buying it for maybe the rec center, the pool room, the pool itself, the party rooms. People are buying for that. And each condominium has their own bylaws and rules. With concierge to maybe have to show your RICO registration. So just so you know, folks, it is a requirement for us to carry the paper version of our RICO license on us. If we're ever asked by concierge or security at a condo to produce that, and if we don't have it, they can refuse you access to the property. Now, some of you are very smart out there, and I know you're going to say, well, hang on a second, Mike. I have the, where's mine here? I have it somewhere. There it is. No, that's not it. Anyways, I have it somewhere here. There's an app. You can get your app from RICO. It's funny, I should have that here somewhere. Anyways, you can download the RICO app. That's not enough. It gives like a QR code type of thing with your registration number. It used to be enough, but I've now discovered, there it is there. There's my RICO app. So that's my, I'll just show it up here. That's my RICO license on the RICO app. That, can you see that? Yeah. Yeah. So that is something you can download from RICO. That may satisfy 90–95% of the condo security concierge, but there's going to be some that really know the rules and ask you for the actual paper version. I always kept, and still do, keep my paper version in my wallet, so that if they do, here you go. You may not have known that sitting at home on there. Know where the lock boxes are. This is a gong show, to use that term, for where lock boxes can be. I mean, I've seen pictures realtors are sending where there's like 50 lock boxes on a fence somewhere. If you're listing a property and that's the case, make your lockbox stand out. You know, put a ribbon on it or color something with liquid paint. Make yours stand out so you can say, "Hey, Najee, my lockbox is the one that's got pink liquid paper on it." Okay, there's yours. I can open it up. Where's the parking? Might sound simple, folks, but check where the parking is. If they're saying underground parking, unit number 236, go physically and look at 236. Make sure that 236 exists, because maybe 236 doesn't exist underground. It exists above ground. And if we go into a transaction and it's accepted and closes and our buyer finds out it's above ground, well, you're initially going to think, well, it's not my fault, it's the other realtor's fault. You're going to be wrong. It's going to be your fault and the other realtor's fault. It's your obligation to determine where that parking is, where those amenities are. Your responsibility as much as the other realtor. You're both in trouble, essentially. And I've been in lawsuits, not me personally, but as the broker with our realtors, where they literally spread the guilt around. And so you get the shared cost. So if parking underground is $20,000, if that's what the unit cost, you're 10 grand is going to be and something like that. Now you have $2,500 deductible through your insurance. So you're paying $2,500 for that, but it's on your record. You don't want it on your record. I think that's it. Yeah, for that one. Realtor safety. Yeah, this is common sense stuff. I shared with you the sad stories. Always, park in a well-lit area. Always keep your cell phone charged. I wish they would invent, and they've been so close to inventing technological tools that are built into our cell phones and even devices. I remember being part of a committee 10 years ago with Royal LePage Canada, where there was like a little fob that you could hit the button, and it was kind of like for elderly people when they fall, and they can hit that button, or the button senses that they've fallen, it sends a message to a dispatch. I wish we could get something like that for our industry, because we're a very vulnerable sector when you really think about it. Like, we're putting ourselves out there, if they're strangers, to people we really don't know. Again, that's why I want you and encourage you to build a database of relationships, not strangers. After showing procedures, I always ask them how they thought and felt about the property they were looking at. And I always had a reason to follow up with those people after the showing. It could be as simple as, hey, I noticed that you had made a comment about the appliances here. Let me check to see, because they didn't make a mention on the listing if the appliances were included. Let me check to see, I'll get back to you. Or maybe the property looked like it could have been a grow up, years ago, because maybe there was some staining on the foundation where they cut into the foundation to bypass the electrical, right? Or maybe the plumbing. So, let's see what happens there. I'll call you back and see if I find anything interesting about that. Always have a reason to follow back with people. Your homework. This is the last slide. So here's your homework. Prepare and practice your buyer representation. Prepare possibly the buyer kit that I would have showed you if you were here, but I can show you when you get into my office. Determine what your systems are going to be. Work your plan. And I always say this, have fun. So I was a hockey coach and a baseball coach, but I was a very high level hockey coach. In fact, I have credentials where I could sit on an NHL bench. That's how high I got to be in the coaching world. And I coached kids that made it to the NHL. My most famous client was Rick Nash. He got drafted #1 overall in the NHL, was leading goal scorer at 19 years old in the NHL, won the Rocket Richard Hockey Trophy, won a couple gold medals for Team Canada. Why am I saying this? Is because you take a look at top athletes, when they're on a winning streak and a winning run, the most important thing you'll see in interviews is that they're having fun. They're joking. Life is good. They're not tense. When they're not scoring or the team is losing and they're not having fun, they're down. When they're having fun, they're up. Think of yourself in your own life. When you're having fun and things just seem to be going the right way all the time, because why? Because you're doing the right thing. You're working the plan. You're practicing. You're doing everything you need to do. You're lead generating. You're having fun. Steve talked about it. His new religion of door knocking. He feels like a newfound realtor probably. And I bet you he's having a lot of fun. truly that's the nature of what we're advocating and hoping you'll do. So there's your homework. There's your session. Next week, I think we're doing listing presentations. Oh, what do we got here?
Back to a question from Jennifer. She wants to when the recap will be sent out.
Okay.
So I know that Matthew will be returning.
Right. Yeah, we'll get that out on Tuesday because Monday is family day, right? This is not part of the, I'm not going to talk about this, but these are examples of buyer consultation questionnaires and things like that. You have this in your workbook. There's some scripts for you to start practicing right away. The process, the financing stuff, house shopping, making the offer, conditions in the offer, a lot of the stuff that, I'll put it back there, one more there. So this is a kind of roadmap for you. It's in your book. We're not going to read every line of them, but this is stuff for you also to use as your homework. Okay. So thank you very much for everybody that showed up again for week 2. Next week we have listing presentations, and I'm going to share with you how I did listing presentations and how I actually dealt with the fee conversation that happens every time we go to a listing presentation. I never went to a listing presentation where that topic didn't come up. The fee and the price, the 2 most important things that we deal in a listing presentation. So thank you again. Does anybody have any questions before we shut her down?
So thank you. So Steve says thank you, Mike. Simon says thanks, Mike.
Awesome.
And Fariba says she feels very fortunate to have be part of this training program.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, folks. And we'll see you guys all next week on Friday. So we were initially scheduled on Thursday. We have changed it to Friday, I think at the same time, 11 to 1. And everyone from here on is also on a Friday, right? So we'll see you guys all next week. Happy Family Day to everybody. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
And what do I do? Leave?
Yeah.
Or, leave?